They kicked me out with a baby. What I did next shocked them. Asterisk, have you ever had your entire life collapse in a single moment? When the people who were supposed to love you unconditionally turned their backs instead? That's what happened to me 3 years ago when I was kicked out of my home with my newborn daughter. If you're facing your own impossible situation right now, stay with me, because what happened next didn't just change my life, it transformed it in ways I never imagined possible. Hit that like button and subscribe if you want to follow my journey from rock bottom to a life beyond my wildest dreams. Asterisk. The rain was coming down in sheets the night my parents told me to leave. I stood in our driveway, my 8-week-old daughter Maya bundled against my chest, a hastily packed duffel bag at my feet getting soaked by the second. The front door had already closed behind me, the porch light switched off as if to erase my existence. Please, I had begged just moments before. Just until I can find a place. For Maya's sake. My father's face had remained stone cold, unmoved by his granddaughter's tiny whimpers. You made your choice, Sophia. Now you live with it. My mother hadn't even looked at me, her eyes fixed on some middle distance as if I'd already disappeared. I was 22 years old, a college dropout with a newborn, no job, and now, no home. The father of my baby had vanished the moment I told him I was pregnant. My savings amounted to $237.42. And now I stood in the pouring rain, my daughter's warmth against my chest the only thing keeping me from complete collapse. I pulled my phone from my pocket and called the only person I could think of, my best friend Layla. I need help, I said when she answered, my voice breaking. They kicked us out. 40 minutes later, I was sitting on Layla's couch, Maya asleep in my arms, both of us wrapped in towels. Layla's studio apartment was barely big enough for one person, let alone 3. You can stay here until you figure something out, she said, handing me a mug of tea. But you know my lease doesn't allow for additional tenants. If my landlord finds out. I nodded, understanding the unspoken limitation. This was temporary, a few days at most. I'll start looking for a place tomorrow, I promised. And a job. Layla sat beside me, her expression gentle but concerned. What about Maya? Childcare is expensive. I looked down at my sleeping daughter, her tiny fingers curled into a fist against my chest. The truth was, I had no idea. I'd been living in a bubble of denial, believing my parents would eventually come around, that they wouldn't really follow through on their threats to kick me out if I kept the baby. I'd been wrong. I'll figure it out, I said with more confidence than I felt. We'll be okay. But as I lay awake that night on Layla's pull-out couch, Maya sleeping in a makeshift bassinet fashioned from a laundry basket padded with blankets, the enormity of my situation crashed over me. I had no degree, no real work experience beyond summer jobs and a brief stint as a campus bookstore clerk. I had no references, no professional clothes, and a baby who needed me constantly. For the first time since Maya was born, I allowed myself to cry, silent tears streaming down my face as I stared at the ceiling, careful not to wake either my daughter or my friend. The next morning, I woke to Maya's hungry cries and the realization that I had exactly 2 days' worth of diapers left. I fed her while scrolling through apartment listings on my phone, each one more discouraging than the last. Even the most run-down studios in the worst neighborhoods were far beyond what I could afford without a steady income. I made coffee, Layla said, emerging from her tiny bathroom dressed for work. She was a nurse at the local hospital, working 12-hour shifts that often left her exhausted but provided a stable income. And I left some money on the counter for you. Just until you get on your feet. I started to protest, but she cut me off. It's not charity, sophomore. It's what friends do. You can pay me back when you're settled. After she left, I spent the morning applying for every job I could find online that didn't require a degree or extensive experience. Retail positions, restaurant work, administrative assistants, hotel housekeeping, I applied to them all, writing cover letters one-handed while nursing Maya. By afternoon, I'd submitted 23 applications and received 0 responses. Maya was fussy, probably sensing my anxiety, and I was running out of clean clothes for both of us. I needed to do laundry, but that required quarters I didn't have to spare. I bundled Maya up and walked to the nearest coffee shop with free Wi-Fi, ordering the cheapest item on the menu to justify taking up space. As I sat there, bouncing Maya gently while continuing my job search, an older woman at the next table kept glancing our way. I was used to the looks by now, the judgment, the assumptions. Young single mother, probably irresponsible, definitely a burden on society. I kept my eyes on my phone, pretending not to notice. "Excuse me," the woman said finally. "How old is your little one?" I looked up, bracing myself. 8 weeks. To my surprise, her face softened. "She's beautiful. I remember those early days with my son. Hardest job in the world, but the most rewarding." Something about her kind eyes made my carefully constructed walls crumble slightly. "It is hard," I admitted. "Especially when you're doing it alone." She nodded, understanding in her gaze. "I was a single mother too. My son is 30 now, a doctor if you can believe it. I'm Ruth, by the way." "Sophia," I said. "And this is Maya." Ruth moved to my table, and before I knew it, I was telling her everything: my parents, the sudden homelessness, my desperate job search. It was as if once I started talking, I couldn't stop, the words pouring out like the rain had the night before. When I finally fell silent, embarrassed by my oversharing, Ruth reached into her purse and pulled out a business card. "I manage a women's shelter on the east side of town," she said. "We have a program specifically for young mothers. It's not just a place to stay, we offer childcare, job training, counseling. A chance to get back on your feet." I stared at the card, a mix of relief and shame washing over me. A shelter. I'd never imagined I'd end up in one. "It's not what you're thinking," Ruth said, reading my expression. "It's more like a transitional housing program. You'd have your own room with Maya. There's a curfew and house rules, but also a community of women who understand what you're going through." I swallowed hard. "I don't know." "Just come see it," she urged gently. "No commitment. If it's not for you, at least you'll know what other options are out there." That evening, after telling Layla about Ruth's offer, I took a bus to the address on the card. The shelter, called New Beginnings, was housed in a converted Victorian home in a quiet residential neighborhood. It looked nothing like the institutional setting I'd imagined. Ruth met me at the door, giving me a tour of the facility. There were currently 6 other women living there, 3 with children. The rooms were small but private, each with a bed, crib, dresser, and desk. There was a communal kitchen, living room, and playroom, all clean and surprisingly homey. "We ask that everyone contributes to household chores, attends weekly house meetings, and participates in our life skills program," Ruth explained. "In return, you get safe housing, childcare during job interviews or work hours, and support in creating a sustainable future for yourself and Maya." I met some of the other residents: a woman in her 30s escaping an abusive relationship with her toddler son, a 19-year-old whose parents, like mine, had kicked her out when she got pregnant, a woman in her 40s rebuilding her life after addiction. They weren't the desperate, broken people I'd expected. They were women facing challenges, yes, but also showing incredible strength and determination. They shared meals, watched each other's children, celebrated job offers and apartment leases and educational milestones. That night, I moved into New Beginnings with Maya. Layla helped us get settled, promising to visit often. "This is good, Soph," she said, hugging me goodbye. "You're not alone anymore." The first few weeks were an adjustment. I wasn't used to living with rules and schedules, to sharing space with strangers who quickly became something like family. I attended workshops on budgeting, resume writing, and parenting skills. I met with a case manager who helped me apply for temporary assistance and healthcare for Maya. A month into my stay, I got my first job offer, a position as a receptionist at a local dental office. The pay wasn't great, but they were willing to work around my schedule of classes and workshops at New Beginnings. Most importantly, they didn't seem to care that I was a single mother with no degree and little experience. "We've all been there," my new boss, Dr. Chen, said during my interview. "Maybe not exactly where you are, but everyone needs someone to take a chance on them at some point." With my first paycheck, I opened a savings account specifically for future housing. Ruth had explained that residents typically stayed at New Beginnings for 6 to 12 months, gradually building the skills and resources needed for independence. "The goal isn't to keep you here," she told me during one of our weekly check-ins. "It's to make sure you never need a place like this again." As months passed, I settled into a routine. Mornings with Maya, work during the day while she stayed in the shelter's childcare room, evenings of cooking communal meals and attending workshops or studying for my GED. I dropped out of college in my sophomore year when I got pregnant, but now I was determined to at least finish my high school equivalency. The other women became my support system, offering advice, babysitting, and understanding that no one else in my life could provide. We celebrated each other's victories, no matter how small: a good job review, a child's first steps, an approved apartment application. 6 months after arriving at New Beginnings, I passed my GED exam with flying colors. The women threw me a surprise party, complete with a cake decorated with an edible diploma. "What's next?" Ruth asked as we cleaned up after the celebration. I hesitated. "I'd been thinking about this a lot lately. I want to go back to school," I said finally. "Not right away, but eventually. I was studying business before everything happened." Ruth nodded approvingly. "The community college has excellent programs, many with evening classes. And their childcare center is subsidized for students." The idea took root, growing stronger as I continued to save money and build my skills. By the time Maya celebrated her first birthday, a joyous affair in the shelter's backyard with all the residents and staff in attendance, I had enough saved for a security deposit on a small apartment. "You're ready," Ruth assured me when I expressed anxiety about leaving the safety of New Beginnings. "You've done everything we've asked and more. You have a stable job, savings, a support network. You're not the same person who walked through our door 9 months ago." Moving day was bittersweet. My new apartment was a modest 1-bedroom in a decent neighborhood, close to both work and a park. The women from the shelter helped me move, bringing housewarming gifts, kitchen utensils, towels, a handmade quilt for Maya's new toddler bed. "Remember, this isn't goodbye," Ruth said as she hugged me. "You're always part of our community. And you know where to find us if you need anything." That first night in our own place, after Maya was asleep, I sat on my second-hand couch and looked around at our tiny kingdom. It wasn't much, but it was ours. I had done this, created a home for my daughter against all odds. I took out my phone and, after a moment's hesitation, pulled up my parents' contact information. I hadn't spoken to them since that rainy night, though I'd sent a few unanswered texts with photos of Maya, unwilling to completely sever their connection to their granddaughter despite everything. My finger hovered over the call button. Part of me wanted to show them how wrong they'd been, to prove that I wasn't the failure they'd assumed I would be. Another part still craved their approval, their love, their acknowledgement of the granddaughter they'd rejected. In the end, I put the phone away without calling. I wasn't ready, and maybe I never would be. Their absence was a wound that still ached, but it no longer defined me. The following Monday, I returned to work with a new sense of purpose. Dr. Chen had been increasingly giving me more responsibilities beyond basic reception duties, noticing my aptitude for organization and patient relations. "Have you ever considered dental hygiene as a career?" she asked me during a quiet moment. "The community college has an excellent program. It's competitive, but with your work ethic and first-hand experience here, you'd have a good chance." I blinked in surprise. I hadn't thought about it. Think about it, she encouraged. It's a stable career with good pay and flexible hours, perfect for a single parent. And I'd be happy to write you a recommendation. That evening, I researched the program. It would take 2 years of full-time study, which seemed impossible with a toddler and bills to pay. But the more I looked into it, the more possibilities I discovered: evening classes, scholarships for single parents, work-study opportunities. I called Layla to discuss the idea, and she was immediately supportive. You could do it, sophomore. It would be tough, but when has that ever stopped you? And I could help with Maya sometimes. The next person I called was Ruth, who not only encouraged me but connected me with resources I hadn't even known existed: a special fund for former shelter residents pursuing education, a mentorship program for women entering healthcare fields. This is exactly what we hoped for you, she said warmly. Building a sustainable future doesn't just mean surviving, it means thriving. 2 months later, I submitted my application to the dental hygiene program, along with an essay about my journey as a single mother. Dr. Chen wrote a glowing recommendation, emphasizing my quick learning, professionalism, and compassion with patients. While waiting for a response, I continued working and saving, establishing a routine with Maya in our new home. She was growing into a curious, joyful toddler who loved books and dancing and making friends at the park. Sometimes I caught glimpses of her father in her smile or the way she furrowed her brow in concentration, but those moments no longer brought pain, just a quiet acknowledgement that he had missed out on knowing this extraordinary little person. The acceptance letter arrived on a Tuesday afternoon. I stood in our tiny kitchen, reading and rereading the words until they blurred through my tears. I was in. Classes would start in the fall, giving me time to arrange childcare, adjust my work schedule, and prepare Maya for the changes ahead. That weekend, I took Maya to visit New Beginnings, sharing my news with Ruth and the current residents. The women celebrated with me, some asking questions about the program, clearly seeing possibilities for their own futures they hadn't considered before. You're an inspiration, Ruth told me quietly as we watched Maya play with another child in the backyard. Not just to these women, but to me as well. This is why I do this work, to see transformations like yours. I shook my head, embarrassed. I'm not special. I just did what I had to do. That's exactly what makes you special, she countered. Not everyone does what they have to do, Sophia. Many people give up, take easier paths, blame others. You never did. As summer turned to fall, I prepared for this new chapter. I arranged to reduce my hours at the dental office while maintaining enough income to cover our expenses. I enrolled Maya in a preschool program that aligned with my class schedule. I bought used textbooks and a refurbished laptop, set up a study area in our small living room, and stocked our freezer with homemade meals for busy days. The night before classes began, after tucking Maya into bed with extra stories and reassurances about her new preschool, I found myself drawn to my phone again, to my parents' contact information. This time, I did call. The phone rang 4 times before my mother's voice, hesitant and surprised, answered. Sophia? Hi, Mom, I said, my heart pounding. I thought you might want to know that I'm starting college tomorrow. Dental hygiene program. There was a long silence, then a muffled sound that might have been a sob. That's wonderful, honey. We talked for 20 minutes, a stilted, careful conversation full of gaps and unspoken hurts, but a beginning nonetheless. She asked about Maya, listened to stories about her granddaughter's antics, promised to talk to my father about a possible visit. I hung up feeling unsettled but somehow lighter. Reconciliation, if it came, would be a long and complicated process. But like everything else in my life now, I would approach it one step at a time, with clear eyes and strong boundaries. The first semester was even harder.